much, everybody. Make no mistake about it. I'm here because of crooked Joe Biden, the worst president in the history of our country. Is destroying our country. This country is being destroyed rapidly, not slowly, rapidly. On the borders, on energy, on inflation, on everything you can name. Afghanistan removal, everything about what he's done. He's destroying our country. And he's also destroying it with weaponization. And this is purely his weaponization. See who's in the courtroom. You go, just see who's in the courtroom. You'll see. And you'll see where they come from. And if you report it accurately, a lot of people are going to be very upset. But this is all election hunting, election interfering. It's going after Joe Biden's political opponent because he can't do it himself. And they're helping out. And we have a judge who's highly conflicted. He happens to be corrupt. It's the worst confliction. It's the worst that anybody's seen. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. There can't even be the prospect of an impropriety. And it's a shame. Wall Street Journal editorial report today, Alvin Bragg hasn't proved his case in the Trump trial. The evidence shows why the charges should never have been brought. After 20 days in court and a trial transcript of 4,000 pages, the missing piece is still the missing piece. There is no crime. Wall Street Journal. Jonathan Turley, a classic closing page by the lawyers, is to use a physical object like a three-legged stool. If any three-legged stool is missing and any leg is missing, the stool absolutely collapses. Even a cursory review of the evidence shows that this case does not have a leg to stand on. This is a case without a leg to stand on. This is Jonathan Turley. The case against Trump should end in a very strong not guilty. Not guilty. I don't know these people, but they're great legal scholars. Greg Jarrett, every defendant has the fundamental right to be informed of the nature and the cause of the accusation against him, but Bragg never abided by that constitutional guarantee. Even worse, Mershon let him get away with it. He let Bragg get away with a trial that Bragg didn't want to put. And he should have done it 7 years ago if they were going to do it. They should have brought this case 7 years ago, not in the middle of my presidential election, where I'm leading by a lot, Biden by a lot. They brought it right in the middle of the election. Hopefully it doesn't work out for them. The same way allowed the local court to be misused to enforce a federal law over which he has no authority or jurisdiction. They have a federal law which they're using, but they have absolutely no authority. And under the federal law, I did nothing wrong. Andy McCarthy, former FEC Commissioner Bradley Smith, who's the expert that they wouldn't allow me to use, the #1 in the country. FEC Commissioner Bradley Smith's testimony would have established that Trump cannot have willfully violated FECA, that's Federal Election Campaign Act, because NDAs are not campaign expenditures. You know, there's nothing wrong with an NDA. They're signed all the time by many, many companies. They sign them literally on an hourly basis. Because NDAs cannot have, and then it says Trump did not have a FECA legal duty with respect to them. He could not have intentionally flouted the known legal duty. In other words, he's innocent. Mark Levin, same thing. The Bragg case is about lawfare run amok against a former president running again for president. It also represents the greatest effort to interfere with and steal an election. Donald Trump did nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong. This is everybody saying it. Except we have a judge who's corrupt. We have a judge who's conflicted. You know what the conflict is. So do I, but I can't say it because I'm under a gag order, which is another unconstitutional thing. You ever hear of a president, leading candidate, leading Biden, leading everybody, and have a gag order? I'm not allowed to speak. It's a first. No president has not been allowed to speak. But this is it. Read the cover today of the New York Post. Read all the stories in the New York Post. Everybody says this is crazy. This is not the trial that should happen. It's a very sad day. This is a dark day in America. We have a rigged court case that should have never been brought, and it should have been brought in another jurisdiction. As you know, we asked for that, and the judge never allows us anything. And just to end, we had an election expert who was going to say everything was perfect, where the FEC did nothing. It was fine. And we had a lot of other people. I could give you a list of 40 people that would say the exact same thing as these people said. So thank you all very much. We'll see how it goes. This is a very dangerous day for America. It's a very sad day. Thank you.
Are you worried about a conviction?
Todd, are you confident tonight?
Morning, everybody. Good to go? All right. Thank you so much for being here. First of all, let me say this first and foremost. We're not here today because of what's going on over there. We're here today because you all are here. And so we are glad that you're all here this morning. We're here primarily because of the threat that Donald Trump poses to the United States of America and to our democracy. We are, of course, grateful to have two brave officers, Michael Fanone and Harry Dunn, who defended our democracy and our Capitol against the violent mob that Trump incited on January 6, 2021 here with us. And of course, we are happy to have Robert De Niro, a native New Yorker who can spot BS a mile away and isn't afraid to call it out. So the contrast here pretty much writes itself. As we speak, Donald Trump's somewhere fighting for himself, maybe taking a power nap. And we've seen him for weeks and for months now. We've seen the ramblings of an unhinged, power-hungry, self-centered man, both here at Mar-a-Lago, on Truth Social, wherever he may be. But the thing is, this isn't new for Donald Trump. It's how he spent his 4 years in the White House. It's how he spent every moment since he lost the 2020 election. And in 1 month, Americans are going to have an opportunity to witness in prime time the clear contrast between Donald Trump, who's a chaos agent, waging a self-obsessed campaign of revenge and retribution, go up against Joe Biden, who's a leader who fights for Americans every single day. As the president said when he challenged Trump to debate, the president has a list of things he'd like to talk to Trump about if Trump does in fact show up in Atlanta on June 27th. He wants to talk about why Donald Trump's the architect of the repeal of Roe v. Wade, why he wants to go even further in his second term, why he thinks the extreme state-level abortion bans are playing out brilliantly across the country. He wants to talk about Trump's embrace of political violence and the core threat he poses to our democracy. Lastly, he wants to talk about Trump's economic plans and how they'd make Trump and his rich friends richer at the expense of working families, just like he has his entire life. So that's what this campaign is going to be focused on and talking about over the course of the next month. We're going to make sure that Trump has to answer for all of the above and for his extremism on the debate stage. That started last week when we launched our new ad, narrated by Mr. De Niro, which underscores Trump's increasingly unhinged and dangerous quest for power. And we're not going to let our foot off the gas. You'll be hearing and seeing a lot from our campaign as we bring the states of the election directly to the voters who are going to decide it. It's simple. Trump poses a unique and growing threat to our fundamental rights and our freedoms, our very democracy, and our economy. The threat is crystal clear today. It will remain crystal clear tomorrow, and it will be crystal clear on the debate stage in Atlanta on June 27th. So now I'm going to pause and turn it over to Robert De Niro.
Thank you. I mean, this is really, even these people over here are kind of, it's kind of crazy. It's really crazy, and this thing, Donald Trump, has created this. He should be telling them not to do this, but he's just he wants to sow total chaos, which he's succeeding in some areas and places to do. Anyway, beside all that, this is my neighborhood, downtown New York City. I grew up here and feel at home in these streets. I feel comfortable. The Twin Towers fell just over here, just over there. This part of the city was like a ghost town. But we vowed we would not allow terrorists to change our way of life. And we started the Tribeca Festival to bring people back. I love this city. I love this city. I don't want to destroy it. Donald Trump wants to destroy not only the city, but the country, and eventually he could destroy the world. But we vowed we would not allow terrorists. I owe this city a lot. And that's why it's so weird that Donald Trump is just across the street. Because he doesn't belong in my city. I don't know where he belongs, but he certainly doesn't belong here. We New Yorkers used to tolerate him when he was just another grubby real estate hustler masquerading as a big shot. A two-bit playboy lying his way into the tabloids, pretending to be a spokesperson for himself. He was calling it as himself for himself, to fool the press into inflating his net worth. A clown. But this city is pretty accommodating. We make room for clowns. We have them all over the city. People who do crazy things in the street, we tolerate it. It's part of the city, it's part of the culture. But not a person like Trump who will eventually run the country. That does not work, and we all know that. Anyway, we make room for clowns, to each his own. But no one takes him or took him really seriously. They take him seriously now, of course. But around the country, people who didn't know him as we did started to support him. They bought into his bullshit. Trump bought their votes with outrageous lies and empty promises. He got the most religious evangelicals to applaud a sinner who bragged about sexual assault, and who, just a couple of blocks from here, a jury found him liable for sexual abuse. Somehow, he even got self-styled patriots to support a man who called for terminating the Constitution, and on January 6th, rallied an angry mob to threaten democracy, leaving death and destruction in its wake. That's why I needed to be involved and wanted to be involved in the new Biden-Harris ad, because it shows the violence of Trump and reminds us that he'll use violence against anyone who stands in the way of his megalomania and greed. But it's a coward's violence. You think Trump ever threw a punch himself or took one? This guy who ran and hid in the White House bunker when there were protesters outside? No way. He doesn't get blood on his hands. No, he doesn't. He directs the mob to do his dirty work for him by making a suggestion, an inference. And his gang grovels and follows his obvious order. It's no surprise that the murder rate and other violent crimes peaked under Trump and are falling under Biden. And now he's promising to use our own military to attack U.S. citizens. That's the tyrant. That's the tyrant he's telling us he'll be. And believe me, he means it. When Trump ran in 2016, it was like a joke. This buffoon running for president. No, never could happen. We'd forgotten the lessons of history that showed us other clowns who weren't taken seriously until they became vicious dictators. With Trump, we have a second chance, and no one is laughing now. This is the time to stop him by voting him out once and for all. We don't want to wake up after the election saying, what, again? My God, what the hell have we done? We can't have that happen again. Yesterday was Memorial Day. It's a good time to reflect on how Americans fought and died so that we may enjoy the freedoms guaranteed to us by a democratic government. A government that, as President Lincoln said, of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Under Trump, this kind of government will perish from the earth. I don't mean to scare you. No, wait, maybe I do mean to scare you. If Trump returns to the White House, you can kiss these freedoms goodbye that we all take for granted. And elections, forget about it. That's over. That's done. If he gets in, I can tell you right now, he will never leave. He will never leave. You know that. He will never leave. What does that mean? Is that the country we want to live in? Do we want him running this country and saying, I'm not leaving, I'm dictator for life? I hope this new ad campaign reaches outside the bubble to remind supporters of what a danger he is to our lives. This is not a threat. This is a reality. And that's why I've joined the Biden-Harris campaign, because the only way to preserve our freedoms and hold on to our humanity is to vote for Joe Biden for president. Really. We don't have a choice. On January 6th, while Republican lawmakers despicably tried to keep the loser Trump, in the White House, and Trump-inspired insurrectionists stormed the Capitol, brave men and women from law enforcement put their lives on the line to defend this country. Our democracy. They are the true heroes. These guys are the true heroes. They stood and put their lives on the line for these lowlives, for Trump.
They lied under oath.
They lied under oath. Right. Who lied under oath? What are you telling me?
Those two traitors behind you.
Excuse me?
Those two traitors behind you.
They lied under oath?
That's right.
What are you saying?
They're traitors.
They're traitors. You gotta, I don't know, I don't even know how to deal with you, my friend. I don't even know how to deal with you. They stood there, they didn't have to. And there were other ones in there who probably were in with them a little bit too, and they found a way to get around. Not these guys. They stood there and fought for us, for you. For you.
They weren't fighting for me.
No, they fought for you, buddy. You're able to stand right here now. They are the true heroes. I'm honored to be with these two heroes today, from former Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn and former Metropolitan Police Officer Michael Fanone.
I came here today to remind Americans of what Donald Trump is capable of. And the violence that he unleashed on all Americans on January 6, 2021. For 2 decades, I was a D.C. police officer serving the citizens of the District of Columbia, primarily working in narcotics. On January 6, 2021, I heard distress calls coming from fellow police officers on the Capitol as thousands of Trump supporters rushed them and brutally assaulted members of law enforcement. That day, I, like many other, hundreds of other D.C. police officers, put on a uniform and responded to the Capitol to assist our brothers and sisters in law enforcement. defending the Capitol from a violent, armed mob of Trump's supporters. These supporters were fueled by Trump's lies and the lies of his surrogates, lies that the 2020 election was stolen. Those same lies have been spewed by Donald Trump and his surrogates about what happened to me and so many other police officers on January 6, 2021. That day, I was brutally assaulted. I was pulled from the police line by a man named Albuquerque Head, a Trump supporter who later pled guilty to his violent assault on me. While being restrained by the violent mob, I was beaten. An individual named Kyle Young tried to strip me of my firearm, while chants of kill him with his own gun were echoed by other members of the crowd. At that time, Thomas Civic, a man from Buffalo, New York, stripped me of my badge and my police radio, my lifeline to call for help from other officers. All the while, I continued to be beaten and then struck with a taser on my neck by Daniel Rodriguez, another Trump supporter who also pled guilty to his violent assault on me. All four of these individuals are self-admitted Trump supporters. All four of them committed violent assault on law enforcement. I'm just one representative of the hundreds of police officers that were assaulted that day by Donald Trump supporters, inspired by his lies. The lies that continue to this day to inspire my fellow Americans to turn against their fellow Americans, to turn against police officers. At the end of the day, this election is about Donald Trump and his vision for the office of the President of the United States. Not as a public servant who answers to the people who elected him, but as an authoritarian who answers to and serves only himself. Thank you.
Ashley Babbitt was murdered, an unarmed veteran. Good morning. If January 6th didn't happen, we wouldn't be here right now. I'd still be at work, working at the United States Capitol. I appreciate the words by Mr. Niro, Officer Fanone, but anytime I get an opportunity to acknowledge, address, and thank the men and women of the Capitol Police and the Metropolitan Police Department who served that day to protect our democracy, to protect each other, to make sure everybody got to go home that night. That's what we fought for that day. The fight for a lot of us didn't end on January 6th, that evening when we went home. The fight still continues now. What happened that day was an attempt to overthrow an election. Donald Trump is the greatest threat to our democracy and the safety of communities across the country today. He has encouraged and continued to encourage political violence. We've been called traitors just today. We were all called traitors on January 6th for doing our job. And yes, we protected Republicans. We protected Democrats alike. It's not about the story that we don't agree with. Political violence is never acceptable. But you have a presidential candidate, that champions it, that encourages it, that supports it. We cannot have that. Officer Sicknick, he died the day after January 6th. They said it was because of a stroke, but the events of January 6th caused it. His father said it best. Charles Sicknick. Trump is the reason why my son is dead. Trump does whatever will get him votes and helps Donald Trump. He is about himself. He calls the criminals who attacked our Capitol patriots. He calls the men and women who died serving and protecting this country suckers and losers. He constantly echoes the words of dictators and invokes the language of Nazi Germany, embracing political violence, pledging to rule as a dictator on day one. Those aren't our talking points. Those aren't left news talking points. He said it. Americans need to wake up. This is not a drill. Mr. Niro said he's not trying to scare you. When I just unsuccessfully ran for office. A lot of people that I met out there said they were afraid. They're scared to see what another Trump presidency looks like. I try to pride myself in having some type of way to make people feel comfortable, saying some kind of a word, a hug, a look, or something. It's going to be okay. I couldn't say that to those individuals. I couldn't say it's going to be okay. Everything's going to be all right. We can't count on these institutions to stop Donald Trump. It's going to take us, Americans, at the ballot box to defeat him once and for all. Thank you so much, yo.
Okay, we have time for a few questions if folks have them.
Why did the Biden campaign decide to come here today?
Because you all are here. We've been incessantly covering this day in and day out, and we want to remind the American people ahead of the next debate, of the first debate on June 27th, of the unique, persistent, and growing threat that Donald Trump poses to the American people and to our democracy. So since you all are here, we're here communicating that message as we will do day in, day out until the debate in Atlanta. Spell your names.
Harry, Harry, Dunn, Dunn.
Michael, Michael, Fanone, Fanone.
What's your response to Republicans who say you're running on January 6th because you can't run on Biden's record?
I'd say that's absolutely absurd because we are running on a historic record of accomplishing everything from 15 million new jobs created under this administration, 800,000 manufacturing jobs, the work that the president has done to lower costs for Americans, capping the cost of insulin at $35, making the single largest investment to combat climate change in our nation's history, the first bipartisan gun safety legislation in a generation. The list goes on and on and on of the historic record of accomplishment and the vision for the future. The fact remains that the looming threat of MAGA extremism has only grown stronger since January 6th. And so, yeah, we're going to campaign on the president's record, on his vision, and we're going to run against the extremism embodied by Donald Trump as he sits in that building or anywhere else across the country.
Michael, do you really believe that an undecided voter in Michigan or Wisconsin is paying attention to this trial in this verdict?
Well, they're certainly going to pay attention to the stakes of this election as we continue to communicate it day in and day out. That's what we're doing here today. That's what we're going to do every single day through the debate in Atlanta. That's what we'll do ahead of the debate in September 10th. And that's what we'll do from now until Election Day, making sure that voters in states across the country understand the clear choice that they have between a fighter in Joe Biden, who wakes up every single day fighting for them, for their families, and their communities, and Donald Trump, who's fighting for himself, whether he's here in New York, down in Mar-a-Lago, on Truth Social. When he does venture out onto the campaign stump, he's fighting for one person, that's Donald Trump. And so we're going to make sure that the American people understand that choice.
Do we expect President Biden at some point to address the trial? Organized by the Biden campaign. I just want to know why you decided to do this news conference here outside the courtroom. Why having a political conference outside of a criminal trial for President?
Again, you all are already here. It's easy to talk about the choice in this election when the entire news media is camped out here day in and day out. So we're talking about the choice that voters are going to have in this election and the threat embodied by the man who is in that building right now. But it is a threat no matter where he is, a threat to our fundamental freedoms, a threat to our democracy, a threat to our very way of life. And so this campaign is going to communicate that here in New York. We're going to communicate it across all the battleground states day in and day out until voters are able to cast their ballots.
Would you consider Trump a threat to all these wars Biden has gotten us into?
Any media questions?
Is this a weaponization of the Justice Department, sir?
Any media questions?
You want to answer the real questions, only the fake news?
Stay tuned.
Is there a defense that the president could announce for those voters, especially progressive young voters, even those who are not in Gaza? I think he set a red line for Rafah, Israeli planning an independent capacity.
Yeah, I'd say one thing. I'd say that the president and his campaign are making clear that the president approaches complex conflicts like this not as a politician, but as the commander-in-chief, making sure that his North Star is American security, global security, making sure that, yes, Israel has a right to defend itself, but that we are not that any civilian casualty is one too many. He's been very clear about that, and he makes decisions like this with national security in mind. I do think that stands in stark contrast of the person who sits in that building who makes every single decision based upon what's in the best interest of one individual, and that's himself. And so we're going to communicate that choice day in and day out until the election. We're also going to communicate the entirety of what voters are going to be taking to the ballot box. You mentioned young voters, making sure that they understand that, again, they have a president who's been fighting to address the existential threat that is climate change, making the single largest investment in climate change in our nation's history, making sure that they understand that they have a president, Joe Biden, who's been fighting relentlessly to make sure that we can live in communities free from gun violence, passing the first bipartisan gun safety legislation in a generation. We're going to make sure that they bring all of this information to the ballot box and they understand the clear choice between Joe Biden, who thinks about them, their safety, their interests, day in and day out, versus Donald Trump, who's thinking about himself no matter what the issue is. All right, y'all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Jason Miller with the Trump campaign, here with Caroline Levitt and Stephen Chung. So the Biden folks have finally done it. After months of saying the politics had nothing to do with this trial, they showed up and made a campaign event out of a Lower Manhattan trial day for President Trump. In fact, Biden's cronies had a printed out campaign sign saying Biden-Harris. So why the change? Why is Joe Biden now making this a campaign event after months of weaponizing the legal system against President Trump? Because Joe Biden's numbers are in the tank. The headline for today in Politico very simply said, Dems in freak out over Joe Biden. Joe Biden is losing nationally, is losing in every single battleground state, and President Trump's numbers continue to rise. And the best that Biden can do is roll out a washed-up actor. And don't worry, my remarks will be shorter than The Irishman. I won't make you suffer for 3 hours. But the best they can do is roll out a washed-up actor. Last week, President Trump spoke in the Bronx, where he had over 25,000 people show up to rally around him. And the best the Biden campaign could do was put out a web video with Robert De Niro. There is nothing behind the Biden campaign. Their numbers are in the toilet. Kamala Harris is a terrible alternative, and it's all an attempt to try to turn around the Biden campaign. Now, what's happening here in Manhattan? We're in closing arguments for the Biden trial. We've been here for 6 weeks. Nobody has said that President Trump did anything wrong. We have a highly conflicted judge, with an unconstitutional gag order, and everybody sees this case for what it is. In fact, the New York Post this morning, with the headline for Jonathan Turley, as Trump trial comes to close, DA's flimsy case is nothing to brag about. Everybody knows this case is complete garbage. President Trump did nothing wrong. This is all politics. If you don't think this is politics, then why do the Democrats wheel out a retread like Robert De Niro to try to change the subject? You can see the look on the Biden campaign staffers' faces. They knew this was a bad idea. They didn't want to be here. But somebody at Central Command told them that everything is going down the tubes for Joe Biden. And they hand it over now to Caroline Levitt.
What you just heard from is a desperate and failing and pathetic campaign who knows that they are losing. Joe Biden's sending his campaign outside of this criminal courthouse. It is a full-blown concession that this trial is a witch hunt that comes from the top, comes from Joe Biden, and he is using a far-left district attorney in this city, Alvin Bragg. This case would have been laughed out of any other courtroom in America. Legal scholars on both sides of the aisle, even liberal legal scholars, agree there is no crime, there is no case. But Joe Biden knew he could use Alvin Bragg, who is sitting in that courthouse today, wasting away the tax dollars of the hardworking people of this city, to go after Joe Biden's political opposition. And the man overseeing this case is a corrupt and highly partisan and crooked judge who is highly conflicted for reasons that President Trump can't even talk about, because this judge imposed an unconstitutional gag order on the former president of the United States and the leading frontrunner in this election. This is a disgrace. President Trump has been locked up in that courtroom for 6 weeks, but guess what? The American people see through this witch hunt and this scam, and that's why President Trump continues to rise in the polls. That's why he pulls a crowd of more than 25,000 in the deep blue Bronx. That's why he pulls a crowd of more than 100,000 in deep blue New Jersey. Everywhere he goes, everyday Americans, not elitist, out-of-touch Hollywood actors like Robert De Niro, who have no idea the real problems that people in this city and across this country are facing. President Trump is backed by the hardworking men and women of this country, and I could not help but laugh when Joe Biden's spokesperson actually came out here and said, accused President Trump of being the threat to democracy. Joe Biden is the real threat to democracy. He is weaponizing our justice system. Look at all of you. This is a communist show trial. There are real problems in America, and you are all out here covering this because Joe Biden is weak, he's pathetic, he's a threat to democracy, not only with this weaponization of our justice system, but with his wide-open border invasion that is allowing a mass invasion of illegal people into this country. Terrorists, criminals, our economy is in shambles. We are heading towards World War III. Those are the issues real Americans care about. That is why President Trump is going to win this election, and ultimately he will be vindicated of this sham crooked trial because he has the truth on his side and he is an innocent man. And here's my colleague, Stephen Chung.
Make no mistake, this is election interference of the highest order. Crooked Joe Biden and his campaign are in complete freak-out mode. And that's why they've gone back on the word, and now they've gone in bed with a highly conflicted judge. And now they're making a political mockery of this entire thing. The fact remains that President Trump will overcome. He'll fight these charges up and down, and there's nothing to stop the truth from coming out. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. President Trump will speak to the courthouse media when the court adjourns at approximately 4:30. Thank you.
What do you guys make of the Biden campaign response that they're only here because of you?
After watching this trial, do you trust
Well, guys, this is amazing. I think Todd Blanche summed it up best. If there was an MVP, if there was a GOAT of liars, it is Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen is the embodiment of reasonable doubt. And this entire case hinges on someone who has quite literally lied to every single person and body he's ever been in front of. He's lied before, I believe it's every branch of Congress. He's lied before his wife. He's lied to bankers. He's lied to all of you in the press. And he's actually lied to that very jury. And yet, he's the only person of relevance that this entire case hinges on.
We understand that this is a political persecution. That was evidenced today by the Biden campaign themselves holding a rally here. They bring in Robert De Niro, who was shot down, but apparently he needs attention because it's been a while since he's cranked out a good movie. But think about it. They bring out one actor. Remember in 2020 when every A-list actor in the world showed up for Joe Biden? They lined up one by one. Now they get one person. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson disavowed, said, hey, listen, I regret voting for him. Cardi B, all the people that lined up behind Joe Biden understand that he has failed our country. He has failed the citizens of this nation. Frankly, he has failed the world. But the fact that they are holding a rally across the seat from this very witch hunt, right across the street, tells us exactly what we all knew all along, that it is a political persecution. It is a witch hunt. There is a reason one of the people sitting at that desk was the number 3 person in Joe Biden's DOJ. I know my father is not allowed to say Matthew Colangelo in his name, right? Because he's been gagged. The president of the United States is not allowed to exercise his First Amendment rights in New York City in this day and age. Does that not tell us all everything we need to know about what we're witnessing? It's a witch hunt they're using as a political fundraiser, just like this very judge's daughter has profited from this very case. It is an insanity. It is an embarrassment. It's an abomination to democracy and to our republic. And yet it continues. Everyone in this case is conflicted, and it hinges on one man who's not just a liar, convicted, someone who's lost his law license, has been disbarred, someone who's served jail time for lying before congressional bodies. And that's it. That's where we are today in America. This is a sham. It's insane, and it needs to stop, because if you think for 1 second that this ends with Donald Trump, you have not been watching what's going on in the Democrat Party in the last few years. They want power at any and all costs. Your rights be damned. That can't stand. That can't happen. This sham prosecution, this insanity, this abomination has to stop now.
After watching this trial, are you convinced that the jurors are going to be able to make the right decision?
So I sit here today as a son. Forget about politics for a second. I've been in that courthouse with my father almost every single day. And not a single New Yorker, as they look at murders in the streets, women getting thrown in front of trains, kids getting shot in Times Square, the degradation of this city, not a single New Yorker believes that over $130,000 payment from 9 years ago, from 8 years ago, that the entire DA's office is lining that courtroom. They're sitting there, they're laughing, they're giggling. This was their moment. This is how they embarrassed Donald Trump. This is legal lawfare, all while this state absolutely melts. Everybody that sits here right now, every single one of you, knows that this is not the same state that we knew 10 years ago. Knew it was not the same state as we saw 5 years ago. You have total degradation of New York State because the only thing that Alvin Bragg wants to do, only thing that Letitia James wants to do is criminally prosecute Donald Trump. And they're doing it for one reason. They're doing it because they have a political vendetta. They're all funded by George Soros. That's what this is. This is political lawfare, and it absolutely has to stop. And I watch a man, he's the toughest man I've ever seen, and he endures this nonsense every single day. He sits in that seat, and that's not comfortable. He's never done a damn thing wrong. They tried to impeach him in D.C. They tried to impeach him a second time. They went after his Supreme Court justices. They turned the DOJ, they turned the FBI against him. They couldn't stop him. When that didn't work, guess what they did? They went after his family. They went after me. 110 subpoenas later that I've received. I've never gotten so much as a parking ticket. 110 subpoenas. They went after Don. They went after Laura. They went after little Barron Trump as a young kid, as a young teenager. They went after Tiffany Trump. They tried to make his life hell. And then they weaponized every single DA. They weaponized every AG in every far left area because Biden is incompetent and he's losing in all the polls. Across the board, he's losing in every quantifiable metric. Our country is going to hell. And this is their answer. Go after him for $130,000. And I want to say sorry to the jury that's in there. This has been the greatest colossal waste of time. I want to say thank you to the NYPD. You have thousands of officers down here. Thousands of officers down here that could be protecting our streets. Instead, they're guarding this courthouse against a sham trial. This has cost New York millions and millions and millions of dollars. And New York deserves so much better than this. And I cannot wait for the day that we win. We will. We're right. The entire country knows that this is nonsense. They don't buy it. A poll just came out from the New York Times. Even Democrats, the vast majority of Democrats, know that this case is a sham. And I think we're going to prevail. And I'm just proud of the toughest person I've ever met in my entire life for having the backbone and fortitude to go through this whole mess, as uncomfortable as it's been. And I'm proud to have stood there every single second by his side in that freezing cold courtroom against unthinkable odds and a corrupt judge and people making a lot of money and this political witch hunt. He's an inspiration to me every single day, and he'll be vindicated. Thank you very much.
Well, I don't know what else to say that hasn't been said, but I think it's pretty obvious after all of the evidence has been presented now. We can very clearly see, if you didn't already know, that this was never a case about seeking justice. This was never a case about prosecuting an actual crime. This was never a case about protecting the citizens of the city of New York. This is a case about politics, pure and simple. And it is such a shame, as someone who used to live in this city, to see the top law enforcement officer in the city of New York, Alvin Bragg, sitting up in that courtroom, knowing all the resources he pulled together, all the time, all the taxpayer money in this city that was spent to go into this case when, as Eric just noted, you have crime sky high, people being pushed in front of subways, women getting punched in the face in broad daylight in this city, anti-Semitism spewing out of our universities right here in New York City. They're not caring about any of those crimes. They're not pursuing any of those crimes. They care about this, which we know is not a crime. They have not proven anything to be a crime whatsoever, and they will not. Because at the end of this, we all know what it is about. And to the jury, when they realize these people who have wasted 5 weeks of their time in there, that they have been part of a political game, as New Yorkers, I'm pretty sure they're going to be upset about it. This is not the United States of America if this is successful. This is Banana Republic type stuff. And if they can profit off it on the other side, so can we. DonaldJTrump.com. If you want to contribute to help Donald Trump become the 47th president of the United States. They cannot succeed. They will not succeed. We will continue to fight alongside my father-in-law, our 45th and I believe 47th president, for what we know is true and right. Thank you.
Why would Biden's campaign be here today? What reasonable explanation would Biden's campaign have for being here?